everybody. I'm Dr. Danny Brassell, America's leading reading ambassador, with my good friend Enrique Hank Feldman. And we just thought we'd put together a series of brief videos for everybody on the importance and the power of storytelling. And so today what Enrique and I would really like to focus on is, do you know your story? So Enrique, talk about your experience with your story and how we convey that to other people.
Yeah, you know, the idea of story in general is huge. So I thought I knew my story 25 years ago, and I did. It was my story at that moment, right? I was a band director. But then I began to ask myself better questions, which for me, Danny, is kind of at the crux, like what questions do we ask not only others, but what kinds of questions do we ask ourselves, or do we take the time to do that? And of course, if we're working with students, what kinds of questions do we ask them? So I like to use questions as a bridge to not only learning, but to self-discovery of who we are. So like when you say to me, knowing your story, for me, it's about knowing my purpose and knowing why I'm here. And kind of like if you want to talk about it from an entrepreneur perspective, it's like, do you know your brand? You know, you could like, maybe it's that way. But what about you? What do you feel about that?
Well, I was actually just going to, I'm more interested in you than me, Enrique. You know, it's a crazy time. We were talking about this beforehand, and, you know, the George Floyd incident, it's not just an American issue now, it's really kind of spread globally. And some educators have been asking me what they are to do. But I think this is a great opportunity for us to share with educators what is it that we can do as educators to allow students to tell their stories, for teachers to tell their stories. How do we deal with a serious issue like the George Floyd murder?
There are a lot of ways. It's a great question, and I love that you asked it. So there are some obvious ways, like with older students and younger students, Socratic seminar, right? You open it up and you have open discussion. But I'm going to share a technique that I use with young children and actually older kids too. And it may seem overtly playful, but just stay with me. So like what I like to do with young people and actually all people is help remind them, or if it's first time as a 4 or 5-year-old, help them realize the importance of their voice. And by that, I mean literally and figuratively. So literally how they can use the words coming out of their mouth regarding the inflection. A lot of what's going on today is a lot of people are unaware of how they're saying what they're saying. And it can end up being very hurtful, and it can end up teaching things we don't want to teach and don't want to model for our next generation. So when I work with, let's say, elementary school kids, right, which I do a lot, and even pre-K, I read, right? But I don't just read to teach them vocabulary. You and I get that, right? We have all the nuts and bolts of reading and why it's important. And not just to create a desire to read, which is also really important, incredibly important, but also to teach them how they can use, that they have this power inside them, and that this voice they have, both spoken and internal voice, is meaningful. And I like to start it in a playful way. Why? Because then I get everybody in. I want to invite not just some children. I want to invite all children, because all children grow up with, they are born, I should say, knowing what love is and joy. And then some young people are unfortunately taught other things, right, that are not related to love and joy and compassion and kindness and openness. And so I always try and reach every child. So if you don't mind, can I show you a quick demo of what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how do you make it playful with the kids?
Okay, so I'm going to read I'm going to read just a couple of paragraphs from this book, Sam the Ant, which my daughter and I, my daughter's, you should interview her. Everything I've learned about equity, really, is through and with her, and we're co-authors of these books. So I'm going to read, I read with music. So I'm going to start reading with, let's see, a little early classical music. So here I go. Can you hear that?
I can.
As they flew closer to the source of the light, they could see it more clearly. A monstrous glowing creature which seemed to be hovering above the ground. But what kind of giant animal could glow in the dark? And then it's in Spanish too. I won't do that. You know, mientras volaban más cerca la luz. I'm going to read the same paragraph now, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch up the music, and I'm going to go to some Shostakovich. So just pay attention to what happens to the meaning and how I'm using my voice. Oh. You see, there we go. All right. As they flew closer to the source of the light, they could see it more clearly. A monstrous, glowing creature which seemed to be hovering above the ground. But what kind of giant animal could glow in the dark? Mientras volaban más cerca a la luz, podían ver la forma más clara, un animal brillante que parecía estar flotando sobre el suelo. Pero ¿qué clase de animal gigante podría brillar en la oscuridad? Let me do one more just to make the point really clear. I'm going to play a very different piece of music, a choral piece of music titled Sleep, and then we can chat about it. So here is Sleep by Eric Whitacre. As they flew closer to the source of the light, they could see it more clearly. A monstrous, glowing creature which seemed to be hovering above the ground. But what kind of animal? What kind of animal could glow in the dark? So that gives you an idea of the experience, and the response from kids, from students of all ages, is essentially you have their attention. So that's important to get them in. But then we can start, and I start talking about, so what did I do with my voice, and how can you use your voice? And then the journey can begin to get a little more deep in terms of what is your voice? What does that mean?
What I love about that, Enrique, is because I see, I think it's really important for us as educators to really celebrate the differences of everybody in our classroom. I mean, that's what I've always been, it's made me the proudest about being an American, is that we have, just a salad bowl of all kinds of flavors from everywhere. But I think it's also really important for us to emphasize to our students, especially now times, while we all have differences, we all also have similarities. And the beautiful thing about what you're showing the kids is music is a universal. There's one other thing I wanted to point out, because I know a lot of the people watching this are educators, and you and I are both hams. We can do voices, we're energetic and everything. And I often have educators come up to me and say, I'm not like you, I'm not that energetic. What do I do? But you just gave a perfect illustration. You don't have to do a lot. If you just change the music behind you as you read, first of all, you can read the piece exactly the same way, and just the music in the background could evoke different emotions.
Yep.
Second of all, besides doing voices, you also did other things that anybody can do. You either heightened or lowered your volume.
Yep.
You went quicker, or you slowed down your speech, so your pace. So these are all things that all of us can do. We only have time for one more thing, and I think maybe we should break this up into a couple of videos, Enrique, about finding your voice. But what's the one thing you like to train? And it's not just teachers. I know this actually works in businesses too. How do you use music in ways to really evoke people's stories?
Great question. I use it as therapy, and I use it as inspiration, and I use it to change behavior. Both in the for-profit world, I've worked with corporations, and obviously with a lot of school districts. So we can get into that some more. That's some more detail, but it all leads back to how we connect, which I don't believe content has ever been king or queen. I know that might shock some people. It's very important. Content's very important, but how we connect is really even more important. Think about it. The best curriculum in the world could be poorly delivered. So it's how we connect and position content and our own mind.
Yeah, I think that's so important, Enrique, and I think you're right. I think that's what we're going to make our next episode. So this is the teaser for everybody. Join Enrique and I. We're going to try and put together as many of these as possible, because I really think, and I know Enrique believes this as well, is we need a lot more dialogue, and more importantly, we need a lot more people listening to one another rather than just talking, because I think a lot of us are trying to crowd each other out, and we don't really need that right now. We need a lot of love, understanding, respect for one another. And so join Enrique and I. We're going to put together a whole series of videos on this. But remember, everybody, your story matters. And join Enrique and I next time as we really focus on how to connect your story with your audience.